While my husband was in the restroom, I met a few strange guys. We attended a Taylor Swift concert together. I got too loose and began hitting on other men. But this is ridiculous. I am startled and ashamed because my experience was heartbreaking. How will I be able to convey this to anyone? That my marriage terminated due of a harmless concert. Words appeal to me because they seem amusing while also being ridiculous. My spouse and I separated because I hit on other males at the Taylor Swift concert. He paid for. I was simply admiring them and had a dance with a few. It's not like we did anything else. I couldn't be more astonished by the events of that night. I still don't understand what transpired between me and my hubby. He issued me with divorce papers after a light-hearted dance. Come inside, this is wild. Lately I've been suspecting that he had this plan all along, if not. Please explain how my spouse would send me packing and divorce me 2 days after we attended a performance. This is ridiculous. Hello Rabbit, my name is Emily. I am a 24-year-old entrepreneur. My husband's name is Benjamin. He's a 25-year-old coffee shop owner. My spouse and I have been married for 1 year and 6 months. Yes, we haven't been married very long. I won't say anything about how we met because it isn't essential. It's a long build-up and I don't want to boring you all. But just so you know, Josh and I met on the Tinder dating app. Yes, regular relationships exist. Josh and I fell in love when we met physically and married each other. The rest was history. Josh and I had many things in common. One of them was our passion for Taylor Swift. We were both tremendous admirers, and we attended several of our concerts together. In fact, when Josh and I were first dating, we would regularly go to Taylor Swift's concert. That was a lot of fun. It was a means for us to grow closer together. We didn't stop after we got married. But I never imagined that the same concert we both went would be the one to break my marriage. Honestly, that sounds like a dream right now. It all started when Josh and I decided to attend one of Taylor Swift's performances. As we typically do, spouse and I were incredibly excited to attend the concert together. We had been counting down the days, listening to her songs repeatedly, and arranging our clothes. We were both looking forward to the concert for months. Josh and I were both avid fans, and we couldn't wait to sing all of our favorite songs together. I'd even splurged on floor seats so we could have a more intimate experience. And it was going to be a night to remember. So I thought getting hold of that ticket was a big deal. We had problems buying a ticket because they were selling so quickly. We eventually lost hope that we'd be able to go. Despite the fact that we lacked tickets, we remained hopeful and counted down the days. A month until the concert. However, with the assistance of one of his buddies, Daniel, my husband and I were able to reach our destination on our own. Daniel and his wife Sophia, like Josh and I, were fervent Taylor Swift fans. They never miss one of our shows. Unfortunately, they were unable to go on that fateful day because they were preoccupied with a family dinner, which he had to attend with his wife. So both couples gave up their seats for us. It was a last-minute choice, but we were glad we could finally go. But before that, my spouse and I kept buying tickets. And when Daniel and Sophia handed us theirs, we received our tickets 2 days before the event. We had 4 tickets in all at the moment, and we considered giving them away to other people who were having problems getting a ticket. So we donated the extra 2 tickets to a close buddy from the ongoing marketing. At that period, we knew it was going to be crowded and enjoyable. I prepared myself to have as much fun as possible. Because why not? It was a way for me to unwind. After a stressful week at work, Josh did not hide his enthusiasm. In fact, he closed the shop early that day, so we could arrive on time and get a good location to see our favorite Taylor Swift. So fast forward to that day. As intended, we arrived early, but it was already busy. The large turnout was amusing, of course. Who doesn't enjoy Taylor Swift? As we approached the performance venue, I could feel the excitement building within of me. My partner and I both entered the busy arena. The excitement was contagious. The stage was adorned with glitter and flashing lights. And the excitement grew. As we made our way to our seats, I couldn't help feeling like a euphoric teenager again. My spouse and I were laughing and dancing in line. We waited eagerly for the curtains to open, so we could see her. But at that point, I began to feel apprehensive. I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the excitement in the arena. But I suddenly felt out of place. My spouse sensed my concern and wrapped his arm around me, assuring me that everything would be fine. But as soon as Taylor Swift took the stage and began performing, something inside of me shifted. I couldn't understand it, but I immediately felt compelled to let go and have a wonderful time. It seemed as if I were under some kind of spell. I began dancing and singing along. But before long I had gone too far. I started getting a little too wild, dancing with strangers, and even flirting with a few people in the audience. The combination of her powerful lyrics and the rush of adrenaline in my veins made me feel invincible. And that's when the trouble began. I began dancing and singing along, utterly lost in the moment. My husband, who normally enjoys my wild and carefree side, was surprised by my actions. My husband stared at me with alarm in his eyes. But I shook it off, assuring him I was just having fun. However, my acts went unobserved, not just by my spouse but also by everyone around us. I could see the worry in my husband's eyes and felt the critical gaze of people around me. But I didn't care because I was having a great time. As the night progressed, I became more relaxed. But this time I couldn't hold back any longer. The night was chaotic. Everyone was pleased and Emma. There was a lot of dancing and singing. Josh acted out of place, since he didn't grasp what was wrong with me at the time. But he went with the flow and we danced together. A few minutes into the dance, Josh whispered into my ear. The loud music at the moment made it difficult for me to hear him clearly. But after a few seconds, I understood what he was saying to me. Apparently, he suggested that we find a spot to rest, since I was vibrating too much to the music and appeared to be losing my mind. I honestly didn't buy the idea of abandoning the crowd, because I was having a great time. When Josh saw I didn't want to leave the crowd, he grabbed my hands and pulled me out. He led me to an area where we could barely hear the music. Josh told me to sit down and wait for him while he used the restroom. At the time, I wasn't intoxicated, but I was ecstatic and on cloud nine. Josh left after convincing him that I wasn't intoxicated and that I wasn't going anywhere. A few minutes later, a group of guys approached me, but sat at the opposite table. There were 4 in total and all of them were adorable. To make matters worse, I couldn't stop staring at one of the attractive men sitting right opposite me. He was the only one who could spot me among his friends. At that point, I forgot I was married and even lost my home training. And I brazenly flirted with him. He flirted back and kept giving me the green light. At some point I paused, turned a cold face to some of his advances, and concentrated on my phone. Not long after, this strange person approached my table and begged a seat. Of course I did. Let him have a seat. We introduced ourselves and chatted briefly. Josh exited the restroom at that exact moment. He noticed me speaking with this guy, and I could sense he was uncomfortable. I introduced them both to each other. My hubby sat down next to me. He was a jealous person who didn't disguise the fact that we were married. Josh placed his hands around me and continued to give this odd guy a provocative look. It was awkward at first, but I didn't mind it. Our conversation was a touch heated. It was all about the large crowd that night, and we got deep into the discussion. For a moment I forgot about my husband. Josh then offered that we get some drinks. We remained speaking as my husband went to grab us some beverages. We took several photos, and Josh requested that we return to the crowd, since he was becoming uncomfortable with my newfound acquaintance. To be honest, I was annoyed because Josh was being odd and awkward. So what's the big deal? We ultimately left and returned to the mob. When we arrived back, Taylor Swift was ready to play one of her slower songs, which was my favorite. Most of the time Josh and I would dance together. But that day I was dancing with someone else. Apparently the random guy and his companions were standing where we were. The music came on and I danced to it with a random guy. I looked across at my husband, who seemed disappointed and hurt. It was then that I recognized how my behaviors were harming both him and our relationship. He couldn't stop watching me. Not long after, I went over to his house and assured him it was just a dance. Nothing serious. I also danced with a few other groups of strange males at the time, without caring who saw. My husband, on the other hand, was furious. He could see where the night was going, and he was not pleased with it. He tried to talk to me, reminding me that we were together and that I was acting inappropriately. But I ignored him and continued my flirty conduct. By the time the music was over, and we were going back to our car, my husband's mood had entirely changed. He seemed quiet and distant, and I could sense he was angry, but I didn't care. I was still on cloud nine from the concert, and I didn't want anything to spoil my high. Usually my husband and I analyze everything that happened after the party. But on this fateful day, he left me to do the talking and turned a deaf ear. He was uninterested in what I was saying. If he had his way, he could have banged my skull against the wall. Josh kept giving me the cold shoulder. The more I talked, the angrier he became. When Josh feels angry or irritated, the veins on his head become more prominent, and at that point it pours out more. He felt like punching something. I quickly gave him room so he wouldn't practice on my face, and I stopped speaking. Just as we were going to enter the automobile, I asked him whether everything was fine, and guess what? That's when Josh erupted on me. My spouse roared so loudly that everyone outside stared at us. Josh even grasped my hand so tightly that I was astonished. At that point I tried to let go of his grip, but it was tough. Josh called me a variety of names. He told me how I disrespected him during the performance, and had the nerve to mock him by flirting and dancing with random men. I explained that it was just a harmless dance, and he gave me another hot slap. My cheeks turned crimson and heated. I couldn't tolerate the agony because it hurt, so I did my best and let go of his grip. We got into such a heated argument that security had to come and chase us away. We got into the car and Josh drove away. While we were driving home, Josh drove aggressively and at a high speed. I became terrified and began praying and pleading for an end to it all. But it went unanswered. When we arrived, we were supposed to turn onto our house street. Josh did a U-turn. I asked him why he did that and where he was taking me. But he didn't respond. Before I knew it, we were in the middle of nowhere. Josh pulled over and got out of the car. He then went to the passenger seat and told me to get down. It was as if I was dreaming, because I couldn't understand why Josh had brought me to the middle of nowhere and ordered me to get out of the car. I looked at him and asked if this was a joke, then told him to stop, because it was too expensive, and I didn't find it funny. I remained seated and did not leave. But then Josh pulled me out in such a way that I collapsed face down on the ground. He then instructed me to find my way home, or better yet, some of the guys I danced and flirted with to my rescue. My husband also told me that this was only the tip of the iceberg, and that there was more in store for me. And this was one of the punishments he had planned for me, for having the audacity to humiliate him. And he zoomed away. I couldn't believe what Josh told me, nor could I believe my own eyes. I kept asking myself if this was the husband I married, because Josh was never this way. I still don't understand how dancing with random guys could enrage Josh in the way it did. I saw it as a normal thing, but Josh took it personally. Like, seriously. Come on. This is hilarious and unbelievable. At that point I was stranded. I had no idea where I was, because there was no signal on my phone to check Google Maps. I checked the time and it was 11:12 p.m. It was very late and the streets were quiet. Hardly you can find anyone. To make matters worse, I had no idea where I was. The weather that day was not cooperative. It was extremely cold. Josh abandoned me in the cold in the middle of nowhere, with no phone signal and my battery running low. I managed to walk to a location before I discovered a supermarket. Luckily they were still open, so I went there to see if I could get some help. I approached the store attendant, who was very friendly with me. I narrated how I got here and told her how stranded I was. The store attendant told me the location I was, and also told me I would be able to get back to town. Honestly speaking, the place I was far away from town. I thanked the lady and left. I kept walking down the route the lady described for me. It was difficult, because there were a few street lights that were working that day. But all in all, I managed to get back home around 1 a.m. I knocked at the door, but Josh didn't open up. He knew I was the one, but didn't open the door for me. I kept on calling and shouting out to him, but he refused to come out. I was so angry. The cold really dealt with me that day. And then the next morning, I woke up with a bucket of water being splashed on my face. Apparently Josh was washing his car that day. It was a Saturday morning, and he usually washed the car himself. On weekdays he takes it to the car wash. He knew I laid beside the car. That was why he splashed me water. I quickly woke up and stood up all drenched up. I was very annoyed. I asked him why he did that, but he asked me to shut up and get out of his house. At that moment, I knelt down and began pleading for him to forgive me. But he walked out. Josh entered the house and didn't let me in. At that time, it was as if I was freezing because of the water he splashed on me, coupled with the harsh weather that morning. I begged him to open the door so I could change, but he refused. I looked at my purse and noticed I had my credit card. Immediately I went to a nearby boutique and got changed. I also went to get something to eat, because my stomach was grumbling because I was very hungry. And after I was able to get something to eat, and filthy he was just by looking at me. Josh also told me how my presence bothered him. He told them everything that transpired. and also indicated he was no longer interested in the marriage. I was astonished and surprised. I couldn't fathom all that my husband said. He told Daniel and Sophia not to spend their time, because his mind was already made up. Every means to urge Josh to reconsider his decision were all in vain. He also told me how frustrated he was in not being able to get the divorce paperwork completed because it was the weekend. His lawyer advised him to have patience until Monday. When Josh was done talking, he rose up and went out. Daniel and Sophia tried their best, but there was nothing they could do to change his mind. We both headed back to their house because Josh informed me he didn't want to come back and meet me. The next day was Monday. Amatina was a stay-at-home mom. Therefore she does not go out in the mornings. Daniel departed for work that day, leaving only Sophia and myself. I was restless and unable to eat anything. Sophia told me that everything was going to be fine. My spouse arrived several hours after Daniel went for work. He arrived with an unfriendly demeanor. He handed me a piece of paper and a pen. My heart sunk when I learned they were divorce papers. He had become so angry up with my behavior at the concert that I assumed he had cooked them and was now serving them to me. My hands turned cold and I was surprised. I still can't believe my spouse served me divorce papers only because I flirted with some guys at a concert. For crying out loud. It is a concert. People are dancing and having fun. Why did mine have to end with a divorce update? I'm back with an update on my last post, people. Even if nothing helped my marriage, I made a tremendous mistake. I believe signing the divorce papers was really difficult because I was stunned and saddened. But a part of me couldn't help but feel a bit unapologetic. Like, why would my husband choose to divorce me over a trivial dance? I had always been the wild one in our relationship, and I assumed my spouse enjoyed that about me. But obviously I was mistaken, and I believe I had gone too far this time. I was speechless and didn't say anything to my hubby. At that point, it was pointless. This was the party that both my spouse and I enjoyed so much. So how is it that the same party would cause my spouse and I to split up? I couldn't believe it at that point. After signing the documents, he said he'd have my belongings delivered to me. I insisted on packing my belongings myself, but he refused, saying he'd do it his own way. And he left. Can you all believe it? Do you understand how insulting that was? I didn't even get a chance to get my things out of the house. He was the one who completed it for me. Kicked me out of the house like a regular lady. I still recall watching my hubby go out the door. I knew deep down that I could only blame myself. I had allowed my wild side to take over, and now I was paying the consequences. And as much as I wanted to be unapologetic, the truth was that I was sad this had happened. But it was too late. Nothing could reverse my husband's decision. And all I could do was learn from my mistakes and go forward. I still have cold feet about concerts. I don't want to go to any concerts till further notice. Here is the next story. My husband found me in the act with the young AP. He disclosed everything in the group conversation and then left. Hello, folks. I've made a huge mistake. I'm not even sure where the fault started or when. I became so dumb and lustful. My insatiable cravings have shattered my once happy marriage. I'm not even sure how I got here. Everything is about to be lost. Everything happened so quickly it was like a flash. And I'm so embarrassed of myself right now. I've done something truly awful. I can't look in the mirror right now. And I'm not sure I'll ever be able to forgive myself for having an affair and cheating on my husband. I blame myself for everything. I lost control of myself due to my lust. I'm so bewildered and lost. But I hope that by publishing here, someone can learn anything. I have damaged my marriage by my own actions. All for the sake of having a good time with someone younger. My children will not even speak or look at me. The same goes for every other member of my family. My husband no longer wants me and says he wants a divorce. I know you're wondering what occurred. So here's my backstory. I am Fiona, a 45-year-old lady. My spouse William is 47 years old. We've been married for 25 years and live in Alabama, United States of America. We have 3 children, Lily and James, who are twins and 23 years old, and Alexander, a guy 19-year-old. My spouse and I were high school sweethearts and married a few years after we graduated. My husband was the standout quarterback at school, and I was the nerd who was regularly bullied. That all changed when he started guarding. I was never bullied again during my final years of high school. High school was tough. I was the geek. Bullies have always targeted me. William was everyone's favorite quarterback. He seemed to come from another universe. Then, out of nowhere, one day we ran into each other in the corridor, and things took an unexpected turn. Against all odds, William began hanging out with me. It felt like something from a teen film. LOL, he saw beyond the labels and liked me for who I am. As we spent time together, he became my protector, standing up to the bullies who were making my life miserable. With William present, the bullying ceased. His presence was like a force that forced those jerks back away. I couldn't believe the star quarterback chose to be with me. I'm just a regular girl trying to get by. William not only had my back, but he showed me a world where kindness was more important than cruelty. In his company, I discovered an unexpected ally, friend, and then husband. LOL, I recall our first date. I was nervously waiting for William to show up for our first high school date. I was 16 and he was about to turn 18 and graduate from high school. The atmosphere was a mix of excitement and nerves. When he eventually arrived, he had this adorable, shy smile that made me happy. We began our date with a relaxing walk in the park, where we spoke and shared embarrassing and hilarious secrets. William truly cared about what I had to say. He made me feel important. We sat on a bench, nibbling on popcorn and watching the sunset. It felt like the beginning of something very wonderful. That first high school date turned out to be an unforgettable experience. For me, on our second high school date, William presented me with this awesome 2-seater bike. We had a great time riding around town, laughing like crazy people. William recommended we have a picnic. After our biking expedition, we found a lovely location in the park, set out a blanket, and ate homemade sandwiches and munchies. We were just sitting there, eating nice meals and enjoying the simple pleasure of being carefree teenagers. William's thoughtfulness struck me as particularly admirable. Our second date was all about having fun together and making another memory from our high school days. We're on our third high school date. William took me to his fantastic secret area, which he truly enjoyed. We strolled off into peaceful trails, away from the school rush and bustle, till we came across his small retreat, surrounded by nature. It felt like our own calm retreat. William explained why this place meant so much to him. It appears to be our personal little haven, where he can relax in his favorite hiding place. I could tell William trusted me, opening up about his special place. In our early 20s, William was 22 and I was 20. We decided to marry. In fact, we were busy planning our wedding. College costs were a constant burden on our budgets. William was working hard in medical school to become a surgeon, while I was pursuing an art degree to fuel my passion. Dreams were big, but finances were tight. We'd sit down, crunching numbers and figuring out how to throw a wedding without going broke. Nights were spent discussing our future plans, balancing our studies with the realities of becoming married. It wasn't easy on our wallets, but our youthful optimism and shared determination transformed those obstacles into building blocks for our big day. William and I found ourselves in this adorable little church surrounded by familiar faces from close friends and family. The atmosphere was a mix of excitement and nervousness, emphasizing the importance of what we were about to do. Walking down the aisle, emotions hit me like a truck. The church's simple setting did not detract from the importance of this moment. It simply made everything feel authentic and genuine. The church, with its simple decorations, perfectly reflected the essence of our love. Straightforward but deep. With our favorite people present, you could feel the joy and support. Yeah. Nerves were present too. It's like a bunch of butterflies are having a party in my stomach. Completely normal, given the commitment we were about to make. Standing up there with William, looking into his eyes, made me feel it comfortable. Our vows were simple, but they were clearly heartfelt. A monument to the love that had blossomed from high school to this life-changing occasion. The after-party was a blast. Lots of toasts, laughter and good times with the people who've been with us through everything. Our wedding day may not have been a spectacular affair, but it was full of genuine feelings. Years later, we were in such good positions. We graduated, and William is now a highly successful medical surgeon. I'd argue they're too successful. He is always on call and available, regardless of the day or time, which has had an impact on our relationship, because he no longer has time for me. Even though I received my degree, I never used it, since I chose to be a stay-at-home parent. Say HM. I elected to stay at home and care for the kids while William went out to work. Furthermore, after William's father died, he left him a considerable inheritance. So we were not struggling at all financially. We were in a pretty good situation. William had everything planned out in case he retired, so we wouldn't go bankrupt or anything. He didn't have to work, but he did because the hospital needed him, and he enjoyed his job. He also established a trust and college fund for each of our children. Overall, we're doing really well. Emotionally, however, it had been a long time since William and I had spent time alone or been intimate. Our marriage was struggling because he had little time for me. I suppose I should have just talked to him, but I was so anxious for an object of devotion that I cheated. I met Ethan in the grocery store. Yes, a food store I'd finished buying for groceries and was on my way to the checkout when I ran into him. LOL. Like how I ran into my hubby in high school. Ethan was young. He looked to be only a few years older than my eldest children, Lily and James. And he was incredibly attractive. He apologized and offered to help me carry my belongings to the checkout and then to my car. But I declined again. He offered to help pay for my belongings, but I declined because he had caused no harm to me or the items I purchased by knocking into him. I then checked out and departed, but he continued to follow me. He informed me his name was Ethan, and I introduced myself. It was clear he was trying to flirt with me, so I told him my age and that I was much older than him. He said he didn't mind because I was gorgeous. Now I know I am beautiful. And I get a lot of compliments about it. Also people, occasionally, tell me that I appear much younger than I am. Which is understandable given that I take good care of my skin and exercise to stay in shape. But hearing it from someone as young as Ethan made me feel good. Also, due of my emotional estrangement from my hubby, as a result of his job, I felt emotionally famished for attention. I smiled and thanked him. But I also told him I was married. Ethan assured me he didn't mind, because he just wanted to be friends. Inwardly I knew it was a lie, and I should have simply left them in there. But I honestly have no idea what stupid and moronic notion or mistake caused me to stay and give Ethan my phone number. Before I even got home, he'd already started texting me. Ethan and I soon began to text on a daily basis. I suppose I did it because I was feeling lonely. The kids were not present, because Lily and James were in college. Alexander was also at college, having graduated from high school early. Did I mention the kids were huge fans of their father? They were all studying medicine at college. They took their father's brain LL, but not my creative side. Lily was training to be a nurse, and James and Alexander were both studying to be medical surgeons. As a result, I was often left alone at home, which made me feel quite lonely. Ethan and I texted a lot and flirted. I suppose I should have felt terrible then, but I didn't, since I thought it was innocent flirtation, and what William didn't realize would never harm him. Ethan and I did not have anything in common. He was not an artist, but rather a musician. Unlike me, he also didn't enjoy the movies I liked, but that only drew us closer. I also learned that Ethan was just 24 years old, a year older than Lily and James. I felt bad, but I kept going. Ethan was hell-bent on making me see things his way. LOL. He claimed that if I viewed some of his favorite movies, I would enjoy them as well. He was extremely sympathetic and would listen to me rant and rave indefinitely. Now that I think about it, Ethan was a walking red flag. But I was so desperate for attention that I didn't bother looking any further into his personality. Ethan maintained a false persona. At first, he made me believe him, but when danger arrived, he abandoned me. Ethan was charismatic, so he could easily appear to care about me. Soon I was smiling and laughing so much that my friends, kids and William noticed. But if people questioned, I lied and said I simply wanted to appreciate life more. No, Ethan had a way of treating you like you were the most important person in the world to him. He truly understood how to get under someone's skin and into their heart. When William was away, I invited Ethan to join me in watching movies at home. Then we would try to persuade one another that our movie tastes were superior to the others. I knew what I was doing was bad, but I paid no attention to it. I tried to convince myself, a lot of the time, that I was doing nothing with Ethan, while knowing that it would eventually lead somewhere. One fateful day, Ethan came over while William was away. William had previously informed me that he would not be returning that night. So Ethan and I arranged to have a movie marathon all night, and then Ethan would depart very early in the morning. Before William returned, Ethan arrived, and we quickly settled in to watch some Netflix movies. I honestly don't know how that happened, and I can't explain it. Everything happened so swiftly. But Ethan kissed me. I reciprocated and we became intimate. It lasted only till the next day. It was approximately 3 a.m. and William had not returned. But I knew he'd be returning around 7 or 8. I suddenly understood what I'd done, and immediately kicked Ethan out. Before William returned, I was terrified that I had cheated on my husband. What would William say? What would William do? All of those questions continued, racing through my thoughts. I felt so bad but also horrified. Since I had enjoyed it, I was so emotionally depleted that I cheated on my husband with a little kid who was just a year older than my twins. And when my husband returned from the hospital, I felt very horrible. But I couldn't tell him, because I knew he was going to divorce and abandon me. I did not desire that. I adored my husband and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. My spouse was polite, humble and helpful, but he disliked cheating. My husband believed in communication. He believes that if you have a problem, you should discuss it with your partner, rather than go out and cheat. I pretended everything was fine, as if I hadn't just cheated on my spouse a few hours earlier. We visited and talked, and William went to bed because he had worked all night. I banned Ethan, after sending him a brief note requesting that he never messaged me again. And everything was well for a few days. After I blocked Ethan, he called me several times with numbers before ultimately letting me go. I was starting to feel lonely, and I realized Ethan was the only person who kept me from getting bored. He entertained me. I'm sorry to admit it, yet I missed the intimacy. So after a few days of struggling with my inner mind, I was eventually able to unblock Ethan. He quickly texted me and we resumed our conversation. Ethan persuaded me that what William did not know would not kill him, and as long as he never found out about the affair, we'd be fine. Ethan promised me that it would be simple to conceal the affair, because William worked a lot and was typically working on weekends. In addition, my children were away at college, leaving me alone in the house. Ethan told me that I wasn't doing anything wrong by cheating on William, because it was William's fault for treating me as if I had no thinking of my own. I fell for Ethan's words, and we soon began our covert affair in the house. Whenever William was away at the hospital on weekends, Ethan would come over and spend a significant amount of time. We'd also be intimate a lot. Ethan also encouraged me to begin paying him money. William and I had a joint account, despite the fact that William was the one who earned the most money. Also because we were well off, I began giving Ethan money for things like transportation, groceries, clothes, and other expenses. I became so engrossed in the affair that I believe I lost myself. William may have grown suspicious since he began returning home at random. That should have been a wake-up call for me, but I chose to disregard it. At this time, I was so involved in Ethan that I couldn't stop. One day Ethan and I were having an intimate moment when I heard William's car arrive into the driveway. I was astonished, because he wasn't supposed to be home at this hour. I instantly moved Ethan away from me and hurriedly dressed and made the bed. Since our children had gone off to college, I had to hide Ethan in one of their rooms. Their rooms remained mostly unused. However, it still retained all of their childhood belongings, and they frequently stayed in the rooms when they came to visit. So I've always kept it clean. Fortunately, William did not even think to check the children's room, and I believe he didn't want me to know he was suspicious of me. So he acted. Norma stayed at home all day. Ethan couldn't leave and had to spend the night in the children's room. The next day, however, William had left for work. Ethan then emerged. He hadn't eaten much since he'd spent the night there. So I let him bathe and join me for breakfast. Then we were intimate. And I made a major mistake. I should have sent Ethan home after breakfast instead of becoming intimate with him again. William may have suspected me, because he returned to the house and discovered me and Ethan in the act of becoming intimate. Have you ever watched your life flash before your eyes? That's what happened to me. William ran into our marriage bed, catching me and Ethan embracing intimate. I swiftly covered myself with the bedsheets and began crying. William took Ethan's clothes from the floor and refused to give them to him before kicking him out nude. I just watched everything happen, understanding I'd ruined my life. William didn't even shout at me, which was probably the most terrifying part for me. I expected him to respond by saying anything to me, shout at me, or ask me. How could I? I just wanted him to react. But he didn't. He dumped Ethan's garments into the trash and then left the house, even though I continued calling him to come back and explain. I cried for hours. What did I do? I'd ruined my life. There was no going back from here. My life was gone. My marriage, which I had worked so hard to construct, had ended. I knew William wouldn't forgive me. I'd scarred him for life. William was going to abandon me. And I knew I was going down. I had no personal income or assets. I suddenly regretted my decision to be a stay-at-home wife. All these years, William didn't waste time spreading what I'd done. I was even more disturbed by how he had informed everyone about my betrayal and adultery. I received a message on my phone saying William had added me to a WhatsApp group chat with my family, our friends and his family. It was as if I had a premonition of what he was going to do. I tried contacting him quickly, but he refused to answer. Then he shared a screenshot of my communications with Ethan, followed by a voice note describing how he had come into the house and caught me and Ethan in the act. My phone started vibrating. Everyone was blowing up my phone. I was receiving text messages questioning how I could have done something so terrible and how I had damaged my marriage. My folks were really disappointed. My buddies were unhappy and surprised. And William's family was outraged because I suppose William didn't want our children to find out through someone else informing them. So he contacted and informed them. I only know this because my children called me shortly after. I was initially too terrified to choose. But I knew my children, if I didn't pick, they'd come over to my house. And confronting them in person would be even more terrifying than speaking with them over the phone. So I picked up the phone. My kids were in shock. They were quite disappointed in me. I tried to make an excuse. I attempted to explain to them how lonely I was and why I did it. But they didn't hear it. They informed me why I hadn't spoken to them. They informed me that William had planned to retire shortly and would have all the time in the world. It's safe to say I had damaged my life. My kids stopped talking to me. My family and even William's family were furious at what I had done. As they perceived, William and I were happy together. I tried contacting William several times, but he didn't answer. So I texted him a lot explaining why I did it, apologizing and telling him how lonely I had felt. William, however, would not hear any of it. He told me he knew how lonely I was and had planned to retire. But he hadn't told me, because he wanted it to be a surprise. And I couldn't believe what I heard. He also informed me that he suspected I was cheating on him, which is why he started coming home at random. He told me I had only a few days to collect my belongings and leave his place. And that he would come to give me divorce papers to sign. I had to pack up and travel to my parents' place because, no matter how angry they were with me, they would never forsake me in my time of need. Ethan has stopped me, and I cannot even approach him. It's as if he never existed. I know what I did was wrong, and I regret it. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I'm hoping that by writing this, someone would notice it and learn from my error. Thank you for listening. My own husband lured me, and now he's unhappy because I did precisely what he instructed me to do. What happened to never biting more than you can chew? He assumed I would back out so he could. He taught me for as long as he wanted, but I refused. And now he's upset with me. He's attempting to make life difficult for me. But it's not my fault that he brought up anything dark. And now he's the one who backed out. I know he's attempting to dump me. And that is why I'm on Reddit to ask you all if what I did was incorrect. He has visited practically every member of my family to complain about me. In none of his complaints did he express or admit that he had any role in my decision. He's simply playing dumb and pretending he didn't bite me into doing what I did. My name is Sophie, and I am a 28-year-old African American residing in New Jersey. I work in a restaurant as a cook and baker. Unfortunately, I cannot provide the name of the restaurant where I work. I'm married to Michael, a 32-year-old restaurant entrepreneur. My husband owns the restaurant. I work there. I understand that this is an unusual scenario, but I am unfortunately in it. I met Michael at his restaurant and I had no idea he owned it in case some individuals try to claim that I married Michael because he owns a restaurant. Let me be clear. I had none of those objectives. I hail from a well-off household, and my parents gave me with more than enough. I got married out of love. It was never about money for me. I had just concluded my internship before meeting Michael at the restaurant. I was simply stopping by for lunch with my friends. Then he walked in. He had other employees. But that day, he simply sauntered in and walked up to the counter. My buddies realized I liked him right away. And I didn't try to hide it. By that time I had no idea he was the owner. I assumed he was a regular customer. It took only a few days for that restaurant to become my favorite. Because of him. LOL, and I visited there virtually every day. After learning he owned it, we made buddies and got along well right away. That is the story of how we met. But now I think we're going to be worst enemies. LOL. We married 2 years after we began dating. And it was a really unusual ceremony. If you want to know why, ask me, I'll just tell you that. It was because my family and his family aren't big lovers of each other. I don't even have to pretend. So I'll get right to the point. I don't like his mother. That woman always picks at me, so I dislike her. She appears to loathe me as much as I dislike her. But we pretend to enjoy each other during family gatherings when absolutely necessary. My father dislikes Michael because in his opinion, running a restaurant is not a legitimate career. Because you are totally dependent on your customers. Turnout can vary at any time. But despite our difficult familial situation, we loved each other too much to let our family get in the way. So that's how we got married. I've been married to Michael for 3 years. But we don't have any children yet. If you ask me why, I will just tell you. It's because I'm not fully prepared to have children. Yet it's my body and it's my decision. Michael has never objected to this and has been really supportive. I started working at his restaurant only 6 months after we married. I used to work with my father, but I chose to work with Michael instead. since I knew he would be uncomfortable with me being on my father's payroll, when the two of them are not particularly close. I enjoy working alongside my husband. And while it was an unusual experience at first, I soon adjusted. Now I believe I will be unemployed in the next weeks, because my husband and I are almost certain to split up. Let me phrase it this way. I'm sure Michael will dump me. You have all waited long enough. So let me tell you what is going on, and how we got to where we are now. Despite the fact that I sounded like a stuck-up lady throughout the first half of this article, I'm not like that at all. It's all rhetoric and no action. Since I'm a really conservative individual, I'm not wild and I don't go exploring every day. I'm just really opinionated and I discuss my opinions. But I never truly talk about them. My husband knows I'm a talkative person who is quite active at home but not in public. I used to be that girl who enjoyed exploring, but I outgrew it before I married. My conservative personality and nonchalance have become stronger in recent years. And my husband has taken note. He's continually asking me why I stopped going to parties with him and such. Michael sometimes accused me of being too bashful. I am not bashful and far from it. I keep telling him that, but he never believes me. I know myself. And one of the reasons I don't do wild things anymore is that I feel like I should act differently now that I'm married. And I shouldn't allow myself get out of character. Another reason is that I am and have always been a rebellious youngster. I haven't done anything crazy in the past. But my parents have always taught and told me that I like to do the opposite of what I'm told. That's why they think I rebelled against them. By marrying Michael, I basically grew out of my rebellious phase and decided to be more calm and collected. I've tried explaining this to my spouse multiple times, but he still doesn't comprehend it. Our chats about how shy I was in public usually irritate me, and that's because he takes it too far. If I say he goes too far, it's because it's true. I have a great sense of humor, so everything that irritates me is incredibly annoying. LOL. Michael suddenly developed an interest in clubs and nights out. He wasn't like that when we dated or in the early years of our marriage, I believe. The problem is that we both have just become the polar opposites of ourselves. I used to think it was a wonderful thing, since we helped each other discover ourselves. But I suppose this is a pretty horrible thing. Michael began inviting me to clubs he was invited to. I didn't want to go to any of those clubs at first. But then I realized there was a good chance I'd be cheated if I'd just let my husband go there alone. I wanted to fit in and be the Gen Z wife, so why not? We do not have children yet, so going to clubs all night was no big thing. But I didn't expect Michael to expect me to join the clubbing. My primary purpose for going was to keep an eye on him and ensure that he wasn't doing something ridiculous. I also wanted to encourage my spouse and participate in things with him, as I'd been informed that's what helpful partners do. That is how I found myself in the bizarre predicament that will now lead to our marriage. Explore. That word signifies a lot more than it should to me. Michael encouraged us to investigate, and we are currently investigating the possibility of getting divorced. Please excuse me if you find my sense of humor annoying. I can't help it. I'm about to get divorced. And even as I type this, I can't stop myself from making jokes. My mother has invited me to her home to hear my side of the tale, so I need to move quickly. Michael apparently paid a visit to my parents, and they now want to hear from me first. Fortunately, my father is not a huge fan of Michael and does not socialize with him frequently, so he'll definitely trust me before Michael has a chance to respond. Now let's get back to what we were saying. So Michael and I decided to attend the parties together, however. He was bothered by the fact that I did not dance like the other girls. I told him I wasn't ready for that level of fun yet. And I tried to make him understand that acting that way in front of his friends was inappropriate. He never listened to me. Michael owns a restaurant, but he does not have to be there every day. His wife, so I don't have to report to work every day. So we can have a party all night if we want. And that is what we started doing. I just followed him to a show and never got involved. Michael grumbled at first but eventually stopped. One of my favorite things about him is his ability to listen to me and then give up when he realizes I'm not interested in something. I've always appreciated it about him. Recently, it appears that he has decided to do the exact opposite of what he did before. Initially, it was a joke between us. It was never serious and we always joked about it. Sometimes the joke gets to me, and I become very frustrated. I mean, I'm a wife. So when my husband compares me to other women, I obviously feel the effects. No woman would want that. And while I appear to be nonchalant and hardcore, I am not. I used to laugh it off, but it eventually got to me. And I began to resent the jokes he made. I needed to get everything off my chest. So I decided to talk to one of my sisters about it. I have 3 sisters and 1 stepbrother. My sisters and I are extremely close. And they are all married. I am the firstborn girl, but I married last. I'm wondering why, lol. I am closer to Nadia, my immediate younger sister. And so I told her about my situation with Michael. We initially laughed, because it was such an unusual and unlikely scenario. However, as time passed, I realized that talking about it with my sister made me realize that I may have been overreacting. So I decided to calm down and give it a shot. I promised myself that I would persuade Michael of my point of view without bridging our differences. My sister also advised me to not say no the next time he inquired. I also wanted to show Michael that I respect him by not responding to his taunts. It was a joke for us, and my sister and I never took it seriously. But I suppose not. The issue was very serious. 3 weeks ago, my husband received an invitation to his best friend's bachelor celebration. My spouse decided it would be great to invite me, and I immediately agreed. 2 days after accepting, I realized I might have made the wrong decision. I knew the bachelor party was something the groom had planned for the guts, but he offered them permission to invite their partners if they so desired. I heard his argument was that he didn't want any of his friends' wives to accuse him of forcing their husbands to do insane things. In other words, he did not want to be the reason of anyone's failed marriage. The bride also planned her own bachelor party or bridal shower. As it is known, I'm not sure, because I don't know the bride very well. And since I'm not very close to her, I decide to attend the groom's bachelor party instead, since he's the one I'm closest to. The party was 2 weeks ago, and I prepared for it in 4 days. The party was held at a hotel, just a few minutes' drive from our house. So there was no reason for us to go any place. I opted to dress up as my favorite character from Queen's Gambit, because I heard it was a customer-themed party. I had no specific purpose for dressing as a movie character. I just wanted to be different. My spouse went, which I'm not familiar with, and I'm not sure who we wanted to copy. Anyway, we dressed and prepared for the party quite early. I didn't plan on wearing a mask, and I didn't even buy one because I didn't think it would look nice. With my clothing. I really colored my hair red in order to fully embody the persona. The only difference was that I didn't curl it or attempt to make it appear like any of those royal-themed ones. I just left his street with my hair in a high ponytail. When we arrived at the party, I realized I had made the incorrect decision. Everything was wild and a lot was going on at the same time. I couldn't believe that someone who was getting married the next day was throwing something so contentious. I was glad I didn't let Michael go alone. It would have made me very upset if he had returned and shown me photos and recordings of the wild party he had attended alone. To all the girls out there, whether single, married, or in a relationship, never let your man or prospective man attend a bachelor party alone. He requires supervision, since what happens at bachelor parties nowadays is just too chaotic and extravagant. I can't give advice because I'm currently dealing with the ramifications of hosting a bachelor party. But do you think it's easier to advise others? So let me return to the main point. Now, when we arrived at the party, I discovered that there were masks available, and that we were required to wear them. I'd seen many such incidents in movies, and I knew they never ended well. I told my husband we shouldn't do it, since it would be difficult to recognize one another. But he said it would be insulting to the shows if we didn't follow the protocol. So he took one of the lighters we had set on the table, which I figured was for people who smoked, and then he burned the edges of our masks, so it would be easier for us to recognize one another. He didn't want to burn mine at first, because he said it would be easy to find me, because I was the only one wearing the type of fuss I had chosen. Yes, gentlemen, I turned out to be as unusual as I had anticipated. His was significant, since the costume he wore was identical to the majority of the ones worn by others. I figured even with the burnt masks, I'd have a hard time finding him. I was concerned about that at first, but Michael promised me that we wouldn't need to look for each other because we'd be standing together the entire time. That calmed me down a little, and I decided to unwind and have fun, even though I was certain that partying in the midst of sweaty people was not my style. Men accounted for 7% of those who attended the bachelor party, and that freaked me out at first. Even though the groom had instructed his married male friends to bring their partners to the party, it was still male-dominated, because some of them didn't want to invite their partners or not. Several of his buddies were married. I'm not sure which one it was, but I noticed more males with short, low-cut hair than I did women with long hair. Perhaps I couldn't distinguish their genders, because everyone was wearing a mask and costume. I truly don't know. I held Michael close at first, but eventually let go and allowed him interact with his buddies. He removed his mask to mingle with his companions, but I kept it on. I began to enjoy myself at the party, which surprised me. I didn't need to dance or mingle to have fun. I just sat there and saw how weird people can be, because of the strange things I observed. I usually kept my mouth open. I didn't care that I was one of the few persons who simply sat and watched everything. I had no difficulty with it, because I was content to observe. It was even better, because I couldn't see their faces, and they couldn't tell I was staring. I still recall everything, including the loud music that nearly made me deaf. I cannot deny that I had a good time at the beginning, while only in the beginning, because the party did not go well for me at all. At some point during the celebration, the groom grabbed me like I wasn't even there and made an announcement. He announced that there will be a game. of truth or dare at the party. And he needed volunteers. Let me just tell you that when the groom was making the announcement, I sat down and munched on some goodies. I was given and sipped my drink without knowing what was in it. I had no intention of participating. And it never occurred to me that I would be required to do so. I was first simply excited to see what everyone would do. And I was trying to think of what games he might have people play. That's why I was astonished when Michael approached me and invited me to volunteer and play the truth or dare game. I knew it was Michael because I had to remove his mask and do a double take. When I noticed the charred edges, I honestly asked him if he was crazy. Since I knew I wasn't going to do what he was asking. I had never heard of a spouse who would allow his wife to volunteer for a truth or dare game. Knowing what happened in such games, Michael informed me he was serious and really wanted me to play the game. I boldly told him no, because I had no interest in it at all. He dragged me to the side and taunted me. He asked me if it was improper for a man to desire his woman to do something wild. He began pointing to his friends' wives, noting that several of them were already standing with the groom and volunteered to play the game. I told him I was different and would never participate in a truth or dare game with strangers. He did not bend or attempt to modify his words. He decided to date me in order to volunteer. Or otherwise, he'd know I was attempting to avoid volunteering and was just seeking for an excuse to irritate him. Well, after hearing that from my own husband, I didn't think twice about giving him a taste of his medicine. I remembered a conversation I had with my sisters and how she constantly advised me not to give him any cause to compare me to other women. I didn't want to do it, but I was weary of being continuously compared and taunted. I chose to do it. I also wanted to show him that just because I refused to perform some things and respected his name did not imply that I was an idiot. I requested him to give me $200 before going in and $300 when I completed. It was my only requirement for entering the game. He consented but made it clear that he did not believe I would actually play the game. I left him standing alone and proceeded to join the people who had volunteered to play the game. My husband kept giving me thumbs up even before the hand started, but I didn't bother responding. I was really angry, and I still am. It just didn't make sense to me that he didn't appreciate the fact that I wanted to be loyal to him and not insult him or breach boundaries. Any man in his position would have been delighted to have a bride whose character and values did not violate the bounds that a marriage was expected to have. He didn't realize that I could be extra if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. At that point, I'd had too much of everything and wasn't ready for more. I only wanted to put an end to his pointless comparisons and baits. A part of me wanted to teach him a significant lesson. And now that I see what my actions are causing him to do, I'm confident that I did. The game had been accessible to both men and women, and everyone was willing to participate. But for some reason, guys dominated the game. And my judgment was that the men's population had surpassed that of the women. We had a total of 15 volunteers for the game, and we were divided into 5 groups of 3 persons each. My crew consisted of 2 men, and I was the sole woman. I am the team. I'd never seen a truth or dare game with participants separated into teams before, but it was the first time I saw something like that. We all wore masks as recommended by the host. Everyone first. Pick the truth. Because they were afraid of being assigned. A highly controversial game. To play, however. The regulations were amended. And Dare became highly mandatory. At first my teammates were gracious. Enough to play the game for me and take my beverages. But it was soon my turn. And I couldn't hide anymore. I was dared to kiss one of the men from another team. It wasn't just any kind of kids. It was a French kiss and there was no avoiding it. I had to do it. Because my teammates had assisted me. So much throughout the game. I had the option of drinking but I refused. I didn't want to drink since I was furious at Michael. I loathed everything he did to me. I chose to kiss the man in front of me. Yes, I did exactly what I said. I gave him a French kiss and that was all. I didn't give it a second thought because I wanted to let go. Just as you had taught me. He had been bothering me a lot. So I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. After what I did, I looked up to see my hubby sans his mask. He was enraged as he looked at me. And I could see. He was upset that I had not refused the dare. His companion even spoke to him, but he did not respond. He simply stormed out of the gathering. Upset. I didn't even bother to run after him. I just took off my mask and rolled my eyes. His companions recognized me as his wife. And were startled that I had accepted the dare. Some of them couldn't even conceal the shock on their faces. I do not know. I had to express that feeling to you guys. Because it was overwhelming. I didn't have to chase after Michael to know. He was upset about what I had done. I knew he was furious with my behavior. And he wanted to react. By walking away. I felt quite successful. Because I gave him a taste of the drug he'd been giving me. How could Michael have been so stupid? What did he expect me to do? When he repeatedly challenged me to a game of truth or dare. Did he expect me to stand there and watch him trample all over me? Who bites their wife? And then expects them to be as innocent as pure water? Well, gentlemen, I didn't give him that opportunity. So I did what I did. Do I regret it? No, I do not regret it. Because if I told my husband to go play a game of truth or dare, society would accuse me of encouraging him to cheat on me. I kissed a stranger with my head held high. I departed just after the celebration had ended. I stayed back and ate and drank plenty. If I was repeatedly asked to let free, it was only a matter of time before I did. His pals would come up to me and inquire where he was. I doubt anyone there was unaware of what happened between me and Michael that night. The fact that he left the room after I kissed a guy summed up all that had happened between us. They kept approaching me and encouraging me to go look for him. I didn't bother looking for him. Because it didn't make sense that he would suddenly back out after dating me. I wanted to leave several gatherings. But I didn't because I was with him. However, he insisted on going above and I gave in. I later learned that Michael had gone in his car. About an hour before I had left the gathering. One of his pals offered to send me off. But I declined and instead got a taxi. When I arrived at the house I came in. I arrived home to problems literally. Michael has just started arguing. Immediately I dropped my purse on the table. He accused me in his own. How do you kiss another guy while I was in the room? How can you even kiss another guy? Of course. I didn't remain silent and stare at him like they do. I am one of those daily soaps. I spoke up for myself and explained how he had actually frustrated me, leading me to do what I did. I performed the activity. But everything that led up to it was my husband's responsibility. And I told him that directly. He accused me of cheating on him and showing disrespect. by including him in his friends present. And he said that I had been looking for a reason to cheat on him when he enticed me to go play a truth or dare game at an adult bachelor's party. I asked him what he was expecting. I had to ask him if he expected me to go and play Cinderella. Michael kept seeking for reasons to doubt my character and cast me as a nasty person. But I resisted. Michael told me he wasn't ready to accept my reasons for kissing another guy in front of him. And I told him I wasn't ready to accept his reasons for baiting his wife Thomas' truth or dare game. I didn't apologize since I didn't think he deserved it. And doing so appeared to trample on his ego even more. I could see he disliked my attitude and my refusal to admit I was wrong. He requested an apology, and I simply vowed myself that I would never offer him one. So Michael grabbed a pillow and a blanket, threw them out for me, and then locked himself in the bedroom, preventing me from leaving. How twisted up is that? He didn't want to sleep in the same room as me. Why did he have to single me out like that? Wasn't he supposed to be the one to leave the room? I decided to simply forget about it and sleep in the guest room. The next morning, I realized that Michael had left the house before I even awoke. And for the past 2 weeks, he has left the house before I awoke and returned while I slept. I suddenly realized he's been visiting anybody who wants to listen. And he's been attempting to undermine my character and force me to give in. I've received calls from several of my sisters and even my stepbrother. I don't see why he's telling them, instead of telling me whether I offended you. Do a lot. Hold a chat with me. Stop recruiting people to follow you and painting me as the bad guy. I've had calls from his mother and siblings, and I know his mother is relieved that the wrong girl her son married has now revealed her true colors. I heard she was saying it around the home. I got to the point where I started writing this just because I needed to tell others. Michael is frustrating me. It's actually annoying. It became worse today when I received a call from my folks. Both of them, particularly my mother, have begged to see me. And while I was meant to be there yesterday, I opted to go today. Now I've gotten carried away with writing this, and I've realized that time is no longer on my side. I'll need to cancel and go tomorrow. Update. My life is getting more difficult, I guess. So I told my parents, and they informed my husband, who paid them a visit, and informed them that I kissed another man. My father asked if it was true, and I replied yes. He asked why I degraded my husband, and I just explained that it was a truth or dare game, and Michael had challenged me to play it. I didn't tell him the whole story, because I knew my father was waiting for an occasion to tell me how right he was about me marrying Michael. My mother summoned me to the side and inquired what I intended to do. I just told her I was not going to let things go out of hand. I returned home and happily I found my spouse there. I told him we needed him. We should quit letting such things interfere with our marriage. I apologized for kissing another guy in his company, and then I explained why I did it. It was Michael's turn to speak, but he made no apology. Accept responsibility for pushing me to where I am today. In his lengthy speech, he never apologized for teasing and baiting me into attending Kobe's parties when he knew I didn't want to. He refused to admit that he had made a mistake by forcing me to participate as well. And that was all I needed. That I had married an egotistical and egoistic man. And I was not prepared to go down that path. Instead of attempting to work things out, he told me he wanted a divorce because he was not ready to accept what I'd done. My husband abandoned me directly in front of me. Then went upstairs to his room and pulled out the divorce papers. Initially, I wanted to talk him out of it. But when I found he had the divorce papers ready for a while and refused to notify me, instead waiting for an apology, as if he was entitled to one, I decided it was in my best interests to dump the fool. I never expected something like that to result in a divorce. It's really not that deep, lol. I should be angry too. But I never attempted to raise my voice or portray him as the evil person. I always admired him. But he kept pushing me to the wall. I signed the divorce papers and tossed them onto the table. He had already signed it, so all he needed to do was deliver it to his lawyer. I begged for the $300 I was supposed to receive for taking the bait. But he refused and called me greedy. Well, I didn't care and still don't care. If he wants to be petty and divorce me over something that was both of our responsibility, I could be petty all I want. I told him to keep it nonetheless, and that I get it through spousal support throughout our divorce processes. His lawyer offered me the house in exchange for the spousal support, but I declined. I do not need his house. My father's home is not closed to me. I did receive spousal support and did not settle less. He wanted a divorce and I granted him one. I did not ask for a divorce. He did. And his rationale is simply ridiculous. I was dismissed from the restaurant immediately. But I don't care. Ego wants to work for their ex anyway. My father hasn't had a chance to tell me how correct he was. In fact, I believe he prayed for it, lol. My mother was the one who disliked the thought of her firstborn daughter becoming the first to divorce. According to her, she hoped I would be the first and last to divorce, and that it would never happen again. I pray too, and I hope I don't marry again. Michael redesigned. To every guy out there, if you don't want your wife to do something that may offend you, don't challenge her to a truth or dare game. It is common sense. Have I learned my lesson? Yes, I did. I should have refused debate. That was where I went wrong. I should have simply asked for a divorce. Because any man who puts excessive pressure and comparison on his wife is not a man at all. The same goes for women. So I'm back to working for my father. So Michael's shock letter to me makes no difference. By the way, Michael, if you ever see this, please know that you are the biggest mistake I have ever done. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe. If you haven't already, also write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Take care.